Have you ever heard of Charlotte's Law? No? What about Helen's Law? Well, Helen McCourt was murdered in England in 1988. A murderer received a life sentence of 16 years. In 2020, he was released from prison. But the issue is, he's never ever disclosed where her body is. But thanks to the tireless efforts of Helen's mom, Helen's Law got passed in 2020. Unfortunately, it was too late for her murderer, but what Helen's Law does is it basically changes the way that parole is granted. So if you won't disclose the location of the remains of somebody that you've murdered, then you're a lot less likely to get parole. Now, it is important here to disclose that obviously I am not a legal professional. So from what I say is just from my knowledge and from what I've read. But it seems that Helen's Law is only in England and Wales. So Charlotte's Law is essentially a very similar law, but for Northern Ireland. Now, call me narrow-minded, but I think anyone that's unwilling to divulge that information shouldn't really be like, they're not reformed, they're not remorseful, they won't disclose that information. And yeah, I acknowledge that people get wrongly convicted and stuff, but that's what we got rid of a death penalty for. And let's face it, if they're in prison, then it should be beyond reasonable doubt that they committed that murder. Now, it's not a perfect law. It does not stop you from getting out of prison if you haven't divulged that. But it does drastically change how easy it is to get back out of prison and how easy it is to get out of parole. But it does work. In 2021, Glenn Razzle was the first person to be refused parole for not releasing where the remains are. But he does always, still to this day, protest his innocence. So today we're looking at Charlotte's Law. Well, Charlotte. We're looking at Charlotte, finding out what happened to her and the true crime case behind it. Before we get started, I'm Harley. This is all I'm saying is, here we tell true crime stories and other stranger and fiction stories when I've got the time. The usual disclaimers I have to go out before we start. This is a true crime. It involves real people, and they do have real families. So I do want you to share it, and I do want you to comment. I really do want you to comment. I love your opinions. But when you do so, please do be a bit sensitive that this is real people we're talking about. And an additional disclaimer for this one, I always try my utmost to be unbiased and transparent. And it might seem a bit strange at this point why I'm saying that, but towards the end of the video you'll understand why I'm telling you that I am trying my best to be unbiased here. Born on Christmas Day 1978, Charlotte Murray was a twin, but in total she had 10 siblings. Throughout their lives, Charlotte and her twin sister were super close. That super close, they even had a supernatural bond. A twin told a journalist from the Mirror that they'd always been super close, and Charlotte had always been the boss. She was born 2 minutes earlier, and that's just the way it stayed. They'd always been tomboys growing up, always in the thick of things, playing in the mud, climbing trees, and because they were a pair, they didn't need anybody else. As long as they had each other, they were good. And yeah, I said a supernatural bond, because they claim, or at least Charlotte's twin claims, that they felt each other's pain. When Charlotte's twin were pregnant, Charlotte apparently gained weight. When Charlotte's twin were giving birth, Charlotte could feel it. They even had matching scars on their foreheads and hands. Charlotte lived most of her life not too far away from her mom and her siblings, in Omagh, County Tyrone, Northern Ireland. Now, pretty much everything I've just said comes from one or two sources, but it does all derive from an interview that Charlotte's twin sister had. However, other sources that talk about the court hearings portray a slightly different relationship. But it's a very different relationship. During court, it was said that contact between Charlotte and her mom were very sporadic, and it were generally always by phone. Such contact were usually after Charlotte had been drinking, and it were in the early hours. And in court, Charlotte's mom accepted that Charlotte had a troubled past, and she'd been violent when she was drunk, and at some points they even suspected is an important word there, that she had been abusing Class A drugs. It was also said that Charlotte at one point were really suicidal, and she attempted to take her own life after the death of her boyfriend. And I'm not going to lie, at this point I kind of get in with a pretext, because there is so much different things. You've got some sources that said that Charlotte were amazing, she was perfect, then you've got other sources that portray completely different, and I really don't want to trash anybody's name. That's not the reason I do the pretext. So because I can't get a solid grasp of exactly how Charlotte was, I'm just kind of leave it at that. And the past part of the information we have to remember, it is from court, it is from cross-examinations, so it will be slightly negatively, well, very negatively biased. So let's move on to the actual case. Charlotte met John Patrick Miller through work in late 2010. They entered a relationship together in 2011. None of Charlotte's family had met Johnny, but she was besotted with him. It's said that after a few months of being together, she moved in with him 30 miles away from her family in Roxborough Highs in Moy. And at this point, not only had her family still not met him, they didn't even know where Charlotte was living exactly. And Charlotte's twin said that was particularly strange because they'd met all her ex-boyfriends before, so what was different about Johnny? The pair got engaged in February 2012 when Charlotte proposed. The following month, March 2012, Charlotte and her twin sister had what Charlotte's twin sister calls a petty argument, and then they stopped talking. There weren't really much contact between, there weren't any contact between them until Charlotte disappeared. And that's true for the rest of the family as well. Things weren't good, there weren't really any communication. But Charlotte's family got more and more worried, especially when events had passed like birthdays and Christmases and Charlotte hadn't been in touch. And what you have to remember here, because there's quite a big time frame, that Charlotte's moved away, she's fell out with her family, and I think I even read somewhere that she'd blocked her twin on Facebook, so not having contact for a while wouldn't seem that suspicious, especially not straight away. Charlotte's eldest brother and sister confirmed that at times Charlotte had disappeared, without telling anyone, to the extent that she even once went abroad on holiday and didn't tell anybody. Another brother also confirmed that Charlotte would disappear for weeks, but never for years. Anyway, the family apparently found Johnny on Facebook and tried to contact him, but that failed, and then a couple of months later, they did manage to get in contact with him, and Charlotte's twin, as well as one of the brothers, went to meet him in a restaurant, and that was in March 2013. Johnny brought with him a box of Charlotte's belongings. He told them that Charlotte had got a £1,200 loan, she'd got a new passport, and she'd left while Johnny were at work. It's important to note here as well that subsequent inquiries did find that she did receive that loan, and it was never repaid. Anyway, Johnny was pretty convincing in this informal meeting they had, so they didn't really have any reason to disbelieve him. And they did, they believed him. They were pretty annoyed at first that Charlotte had just vanished for even longer, but a little bit later, 3 months to be precise, they still hadn't heard her and they couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong, something not quite right. So in May 2013, they reported Charlotte missing. At this point, the PSNI, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, started a missing persons investigation. It was found that Charlotte disappeared between Halloween and the 2nd of November. So them 3 days, the 31st October, the 1st of November or 2nd of November. A lot of sources did say the 31st and the 1st, but for the sake of one day, we're going to keep it between the 31st and the 2nd. And that's just over 6 months after she moved in with Johnny. And obviously that's a massive detriment to the case, because she went missing in November, and she's now in May. So we're talking 6-7 months between her going missing and the investigation being launched. And it's massively thought that the first minutes, the first hours, the first days are the most crucial. But we're talking months down the line. Johnny claimed that their relationship started to deteriorate quite quickly after she moved in with him, and she was looking for another job because they did work together. Not long before she disappeared, she'd been offered a new job in Belfast. At around 5:15 on the 1st of November, a post appeared on Charlotte's Facebook page saying, "I'm so pissed off with life, I have to go away for a while." The IP address on that internet connection that made that post was from the home of Charlotte and Johnny. Now this makes sense, to be fair. We've already heard that Charlotte can be irrational when she's been drinking, so at 5 o'clock in the morning she's been drinking, she makes a post saying that she needs to get out of here. It's something that a lot of people have done. The only thing I did look at that as this were on the 1st of November 2012, and that was on a Thursday. So would she really be up at 5 o'clock in the morning drinking? Had she got up for work? You know, I don't know. A text was also sent from Charlotte's phone. That was to a new employer saying that she weren't going to be coming into work. A day later, a friend got a text message off Charlotte's phone saying, "I'm going away for a while." Another close friend received a text message that said, "I'm going away, be good." Now, this friend said that Charlotte had previously told her that her and Johnny were splitting up, but she said this message came out of the blue. She was shocked, but she felt like Charlotte was just moving on with her life. She knew that Charlotte weren't very happy, and she knew that, beyond anything else, Charlotte just wanted to be happy. So overall, this left her with the impression that Charlotte was just off on the search for a new life. Now, while living with Johnny in Moy, Charlotte had a brief affair. It was with a publican, and this guy says that Charlotte did say that she was moving away at the end of the month. And then when she did disappear, he messaged her saying, "I'm getting the police to check you out." But he says that were only a ploy to get her to respond to him. So when she didn't respond, he didn't really contact the police. He says he didn't see the need to. Throughout the police investigation, Johnny said that Charlotte had become very hard to live with. The relationship then came to an end, and she left to go to Belfast for this new job. And when she did leave, the only thing she took with her was a laptop. Which, okay, that's strange. Why would you leave everything? During the police investigation, Johnny posted on Facebook saying, "Someone must know where she is. Please help." During court proceedings, the prosecution read from Johnny's diary. One extract was, "Someone knows something about her disappearance." Another said, "You simply can't disappear." Now, both of these extracts were used by the prosecution against Johnny, and they were generally followed by some smart remark. Like, "Yes, you can just disappear if you've been murdered," or, "Yeah, someone knows because you know." At some point during the investigations, obviously police visited Johnny's house. And apparently when they left, his friend said that Johnny broke down in tears and he was constantly proclaiming that it didn't hurt. During the 3 days that she potentially went missing, the 31st and the 2nd, her bank card was used twice. Both times were in the local town, and it was to withdraw £20. Throughout a time in Moy, Charlotte had told the local GP that she felt depressed, and that she'd had thoughts of self-harm, on most days, but she didn't have any active suicidal plans. He prescribed her some antidepressant medication, made some urgent referral to a psychiatrist, and a further report revealed incidents of self-harm. She later told that psychiatrist that she felt that she was overwhelmed and that she needed space. However, it was also noted that she failed to keep 5 medical appointments during October. She described Johnny as a nice guy, but she said they weren't much of a bond and she wanted to leave, but she felt like she'd be isolated if she did. In a follow-up review in October, the psychiatrist noted that she feels undeserving of her partner's support of her at present. It was also noted that she continued to drink heavily, but she weren't prepared to reduce her alcohol intake. She said that it blanked it out. The report stated she does enjoy and value life. She denies suicidal agitation, and she won't let this win, but she can't exist like this for much longer. It was also said that she was under investigation for working while claiming unemployment benefits, and obviously showed that £1,200 from the loan, and I'm not sure what other debts she were in, if any. However, on the other side, she was owed £237, just over, in wages from the pub that she was working at, but she never collected it. Now, I mean, pretty much most of the information that I've just gone through was from the court proceedings, and it was reported from Belfast Times. The Belfast Times also reported in a different article that the prosecution told the jury there weren't one shred of evidence in anything that Charlotte said or done to show she wanted to disappear without a trace. Which, I mean, that doesn't ring true with everything else we've just read. And honestly, at this point, I'm really confused to why Johnny's in prison. So let's look at what the prosecution had against him and what they said against him. First of all, obviously they said his story of her moving away to get a new job and start a new life was riddled with inconsistencies, inaccuracies and lies. Now let's look back at something that I've already said. Charlotte left with just a laptop, but she had a dog. Fair enough, I can understand that she might have left a dog behind with Johnny. But she also had a car, and she left that behind. Now if you're going to start a new life and get a new job, why would you leave your car? I suppose you would if you didn't want to be traced, but yeah, I mean, this is not someone that's got lots of money, so the car would be beneficial and a lot cheaper. Despite there never being an official agreement or anything in writing, Johnny says that she left the car for him because she owed him rent, £700 worth, and he said he sold the car for £480 to recoup some of the rent money. For what it's worth, I think the dog were called Bella, and somebody said that he had a really good bond with it and loved it lots and whatever. However, the prosecution said that's a lie. The only reason he sold the car was, it's a constant reminder. You just wanted a shot of it. You wanted it away from the door, this reminder of Charlotte. Johnny denied this, and the prosecution later pressed on, the reason why she left the car was because she was dead and beyond needing the car. To which Johnny then replied, no chance, no chance. Some of the evidence used in court was traces of blood found in the bathroom of their home. The traces were around the wastewater pipe around the toilet, and there were splatters on the wall behind the toilet. And obviously that matched Charlotte's DNA profile. But the defence argued that there'd also been animal blood traces found, so it were unreliable, which I found was strange. That's a bit like saying, well, the sky don't look blue because the grass looks green. You know what I mean? Kind of... I don't understand the logic behind the argument, but I weren't there, so... Johnny admitted that in the early hours of the morning before she disappeared, he'd been on the internet looking at porn sites. Porn with an A, not an O. And his entire point of that was he was trying to look at how he could pawn their engagement rings. Now, Johnny said that he did this because just before he did it, she'd sent him explicit pictures of her with another man. Let's just let that sink in for a minute. Wow. The prosecution then pointed out that that weren't right because the search history and the images that were sent don't match up with what he said. The images actually came up 13 minutes after he'd done the search. I mean, I think that's quite unfair. There's quite a lot of time between her going missing in November 2012 and the court case, which were like 5 years later. So if he's got that order of events slightly out, then I mean, come on, let's be fair there. But I do think it works the opposite way as well. It does show that she was alive when he was trying to sell the rings. But no, the prosecution pressed on. They said that him receiving them images was the last straw, a last humiliation. Being shown to be a cuckold, he then got into a rage and killed Charlotte. Another crucial piece of evidence used was the court heard that he'd done internet searches 3 months later for a double-headed axe and a saw, as well as some cleaning materials. Now, he says the cleaning materials were because of spilt wine and dog had made a mess. But all in all, it does sound pretty extreme. I mean, when we look at these true crimes, that's something that would start flashing beacons. We know that there's something wrong. But it looked for them 3 weeks after she disappeared. So what the prosecution said is, right, you killed her, you kept her in your home for 3 weeks, then you bought these tools, and you chopped her up. Now, I should point out here, these were search results, they weren't necessarily purchases. Johnny put this aside and he says, no, I was looking for a Christmas gift for my dad. If I'd have wanted them tools to do that, I already had similar tools in the shed. In the garage, I mean, sorry. His dad confirmed in court that, yeah, his family had worked in the forestry industry and they did have a collection of tools. But he did also agree that Johnny had been trying to get him a blade for a bow saw. Johnny was unsuccessful in that, but his dad's granddaughter did get him one for Christmas. His dad also said that, yeah, Johnny were aware that I wanted an American double axe. So obviously we can't take his dad's word for it, it's just he said, she says. But he has got an alibi there. Now, to me, the most suspicious piece of evidence is some text that Johnny apparently received from Charlotte. And he said that she sent these messages from Belfast. I don't know what these texts were, but he said he got them from Belfast, and the cell tower log said that she never made it to Belfast. That phone never left Moy. So she certainly didn't text him off it from anywhere else. But I still go, I don't know if the dates align from when he said he messaged her or when the phone were on. And I don't think it really matters because it still points out that he could have sent them. Either which way, if I text you telling you I'm somewhere, on a normal text, you're not going to know whether I'm telling the truth or not. So if she had texted him in Moy saying that she was in Belfast, how would he not know that she weren't? It's... One thing that is certain is the police tried everything to trace Charlotte. They even went to the extent of tracing 41 women across the UK that had the same name, Charlotte Murray. They tracked him down and double-checked that it weren't the Charlotte they were looking for. Over the years of the investigation, they spoke to over 600 people. They had help from other police agencies, including the police force of Ireland, as well as all 45 services across the UK. They requested information from over 430 councils and local authorities, health services, charities, airlines, transport companies, including railway networks, social services, and Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. They investigated 10 potential sightings of Charlotte, not only in Moy, but also in Birmingham, England, London, England, Belfast, Monaghan, and Edinburgh. But all in all, police inquiries established that there weren't a single shred of evidence that Charlotte was still alive. The prosecution had 800 pages worth of interviews from Johnny. In his interviews in 2015 and 2017, he was advised by his solicitor to make no comment. And to the bulk of the questions, that's exactly what he did, even when he'd been pretty much directly asked if he'd killed Charlotte. An officer with 12 years experience said that it were his right to do so, but if he genuinely thought that Charlotte was still alive, he'd answer him questions in hopes to try and clear things up and try and find her. But then again, I look at that and go, well, the missing persons investigation started in 2013. So by 2015, 2017, now surely as a solicitor, you're going to look at him and go, dude, they're after you, make no comment, because you might accidentally say something that you think sounds innocent, that they think that they'll use against you. And that is what they said when they arrest you. That is your right. Remain silent. Anything you do say can and will be held against you. So if you say something and then they misshoot it and stuff, and she did say that it weren't unusual or nothing shocking about him making no comment. It happens quite a lot. And she did also admit that he was very emotionally and visibly upset. In court, when it was suggested that Charlotte hadn't come forward to help Johnny clear his name, he maintained, no, she's still alive. In my mind, she's alive. Until the day there's a body found, she's alive to me. And that's the truth. He also said that he wanted her to walk through the door someday and say, sorry about all this. He also refuted suggestions that he'd declined to help the police in finding her. To that, he just persisted, I know she's alive, and that's it. And he also said, she's still alive, yes, even now, because I know I didn't kill her. The trial went on for 4 weeks. Johnny's defense lawyers said,
the evidence is based on pure suspicion, conjecture, and the comments of an ex-partner. There is no tangible evidence. The detective has submitted to this court that my client was a violent individual and described the evidence of witness B, an ex-partner. I can inform the court some of my client's ex-girlfriends are here in court and are willing to state he is not a violent man.
But in the end, it only took the jury 3 hours to unanimously decide Johnny was guilty. John Miller was sentenced to a life in prison with a minimum of 16 years. Right through his trial, and still to this day, he maintains his innocence and says that he reckons that she's still alive. Charlotte's family are convinced that it was Johnny that killed her, and they're also convinced that he was controlling and abusive. And the judge said, quite obviously, that until Charlotte's remains are found, it's impossible to say how she died, what injuries she sustained, and how much she suffered. After the jury convicted Johnny of murder in October 2019, the police drained a quarry near Benburb to search for Charlotte's body, but nothing was found. To make this even more confusing, I did do a quick search to see if Johnny had appealed his sentence or appealed the decision, and I couldn't find anything. I also didn't really see anything from Johnny's family. I mean, if this were my son and I thought he was innocent, I'd be screaming from the rooftops, what the hell's going on here? Let's have a retrial. Now that's pretty much all I've got, but there is one more thing I want to add before I go into my thoughts and notes, and it's something that Charlotte's twin sister said. It's about the supernatural connection. One night, roughly about the time that Charlotte disappeared, she woke up from a restless sleep. She said,
I felt like I was being choked and like someone had thrown something in my face. I sat there coughing and spluttering in the dark, panicked, because I couldn't breathe. When I got my breath back, I just lay there, frightened, and the nerves of it stayed with me for a few days. I was anxious and emotional, and I couldn't figure out why.
So there you go, that's everything I've got for you. This was a really, really hard case to write. And something you have to bear in mind, this was a 4-week trial. And I've banged it down to half an hour video? But I have honestly and unbiasedly reported every bit of information I could find. Bar one bit that talked about Johnny being a porn addict, sex addict, and that he apparently forced Charlotte to make a porn video. That were off one website, and I didn't really quite trust the website, so I didn't really include it. I have kept the website for future reference as a link. But it's so strange to me, and I feel like I'm missing a big bit. I'm going on holiday next week, but when I get back, I'm going to look into this more. I'm going to see if there's a way of purchasing the sentencing statements, if there's a way of purchasing the court proceedings. I don't know, because for me it feels like it's being reported so strange. None of the media articles make out they're trying to defend Johnny, But put it this way, I read an article called Charlotte Murray Murder, Key Elements That Nailed Killer Johnny Miller, and it was written by Belfast Telegraph. Now, that's the key elements of the investigation and the prosecution. And everything in that I've put in this video. I just think the entire thing, from what I can find on it, is circumstantial. Now, I don't usually do this, I don't usually put this out, but if you're watching this, I don't know if you're new Charlotte, if you're from Moy, I don't know. If you're watching this and you're saying, no, he's missed a big bit of this, there are a lot more evidence than that, which I imagine they were, because I haven't seen the sentencing statements, and like I've said, it's a 4-week trial that I've only got half an hour for content of. So, if you have got that, contact me, be it on Twitter, Instagram, or the Facebook page, or in the comments. Don't come with speculation, don't come with hearsay. I need links, I need proof, or at least somebody to lay back on, like a journalism newspaper, something that I can accredit it to. But if you do have more information, if you think I've missed a big part of it, then please do put it forward. Because everything I've got, I'm really struggling to understand why it took a jury 3 hours to unanimously say we're guilty. Because it's just so bizarre. And another thing that made it really hard is every year in the UK, 180,000 people go missing. And very few of them, very, very few of them, actually make headlines. So it weren't until the police had basically said Johnny had killed her that it started making media headlines. So the stuff from the beginning, the inconsistencies and stuff, don't really come up. Overall, it was a really hard case to write. Now I've wrote it and now I've filmed it. There were a point where I didn't want to publish it because I thought, surely I'm missing something here. But then I thought, well, no, because if I'm missing something, then all the newspapers are. So why shouldn't I publish it? And let's be right, if I'm not missing something, then this story really needs to be out for Johnny's sake. I am not, by no means, like I said at the beginning, I am trying to be as transparent and unbiased as possible. And if you've got more damning information about John that I haven't said, then please do share it. Don't be horrible about it. I've tried to be fair, I've tried to be unbiased. So if you've got that information, please do comment it, please do contact me, and I'll put it out there. Till next week, guys, stay safe.